What's up, everybody? This is Brad with the Mature Minded Gamers, and we're going to start something a little different today in anticipation of the next series that will be coming out later this year. Star Trek Discovery Season 3 will be coming up. So, Mature Minded Gamers, Will and Eric and I are going to recap all of the episodes leading up to Season 3. So, today I've got Eric and Will with us today.
Hey, hey.
How's it going, everybody?
And we're going to cover these first two episodes of Discovery Season 1 episodes, The Vulcan Hello and Battle at the Binary Stars. So before we get started, Will, this is your first time through. What are your first thoughts as you enter into this?
Well, I watched actually the first half of the first season when it first came out, and I just recently decided to go ahead and give this show another shot, seeing as how we've been doing in all of our other Star Trek podcasts with Picard and the Next Generation. And I wanted to go ahead and give this one another shot, and I have given it the whole Vulcan hello. I have given it my all, and oh my gosh, I'm enjoying this quite a bit. I wouldn't say it's as good as Deep Space Nine, but so far it has that overarching story, and I'm digging it. So I'm very excited to go ahead and start this podcast today. I couldn't be more energetic to want to ahead and do this. I know, Eric, this is one of your favorite Star Trek shows.
Not after season one. So after season one, I would probably put it at maybe my fourth. But season two made it my favorite, I think. I think I can safely say that. It was such a good season. And I have so much faith that season three is going to be even better. I think it's going to blow everybody out of the water. I think the haters, who we all know, like people, this isn't the original Trek. This is the new generation. This is J.J. Abrams Trek, and people don't like that. But man, you guys are missing out. Give it another chance, and don't sit there and keep yourself closed off from this, because this is great TV. This is. I watch my wife watch all this crap TV, reality TV all the time, and all I want to be like is, you need to watch some good Trek, and it's on right now.
Well, I want to say something about that real quick, though, because when you think about it, when Next Generation first came out, I mean, people had the same feeling about, the Next Generation. This is not Star Trek. This is, what is this,
Oh yeah, you're always going to get that, I think. And so much time has passed, but every time when somebody tells me, "Oh, well, it's not my Star Trek. I didn't like it." I'm like, "Well, how far did you get? Did you really give it a chance?" Because yeah, it's been 25 years since the Next Generation. And so people have changed, and if you put the Next Generation on now, it wouldn't do any good. They cancel it. Exactly what happened to Enterprise. Like, and Enterprise was different, but I don't think different enough.
Yeah, this really is like the Star Trek of our generation. So, it's only natural that the show itself would iterate a bit and to show something a little fresher for where we're at as a TV watcher, as a Trek watcher.
I know me and you were both super excited, Brad, and we followed this every episode. We would text back and forth, or we would watch them together. And I just love having track back on and being able to talk to somebody after an episode. Like, it's rare to do that with TV these days, and I really think that makes it kind of special for us to have that. I mean, not that our friendship had got, we'd got separated. We just didn't communicate like we used to and I think this kind of brought us back together, which I found really cool.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, this is the one show that kind of brought you guys wanting to do Star Trek podcasts in the first place, isn't it?
It
Right.
definitely got the ball rolling on it for sure. Yeah, I mean, this reinvigorated a love for Star Trek and something fresh to watch that I hadn't watched, numerous times over. I mean, it's been years since we had something new, clear back to the end of Voyager, and then we had Nemesis, and then we had the reimagined Kelvin universe. But otherwise, this is the first fresh Trek we've had in a long time.
See, I don't count those movies though, because you get a beginning and an end. That's what I love about the TV show, is like me and you were constantly speculating. Okay, what do you think's going on
Yeah.
here? Who's the Red Angel, and all kinds of cool stuff.
I totally agree. Well, with that note, let's go ahead and get started on our episodes here. So, episode one, we have the Vulcan Hello. And right off the bat, we see a reimagined Klingon species. as they come together in an attempt to unite the 24 houses of the Klingon Empire under the rule of Takuvma. We see a gathering on what looks like a throne room here at the first part of this episode. What do you guys think of the new Klingons?
So the new Klingons are probably the thing I dislike the most about Discovery so far. I don't know why they did it this way, and they still haven't explained it as far as I know, right?
Not really. I mean, I think that they leaned heavily on something that Worf said in an episode of Deep Space Nine was that this was an era of their timeline that they didn't like to discuss, and that also kind of piggybacked onto some pieces of Enterprise where they discussed that this was some that during this time period the Klingons were doing some experimentation with eugenics, and it's not really discussed in this series, but I think for those of us that have been through everything, I think we're kind of led to assume that.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the style or the aesthetics of what the Klingons, how they look and how they act. I mean, they've kind of talked a little bit about honor and stuff, but I don't know, like they just don't really seem like Klingons to me. There's
Right.
something about it that just seems like they're just a different race. I mean, they talk about Kahless and stuff, but that's really the only attachment that I have to the Klingons that I know of.
Sure.
You see, I think they seem just like Klingons. I don't have a problem with that. I just don't know why they made them look different.
Well,
Like,
so I have to remind myself that this is 10 years before the original series, that Klingons didn't have any ridges or any different characteristics than any of the other species out there. So the only way in my mind that I'm able to kind of bridge that gap is to think that from here to there, Klingons lose all of their physical individuality because of, and I have to go back to that eugenics thing, because of the eugenics and because of their experimentation with gene therapy and trying to bring out certain characteristics and stuff. So I kind of excuse that a little bit through this part. But what gets me most about these Klingons here is how forced the language seems. Like it's not as fluid, and it's more like phlegmy, I guess, for a better or for without a better way to describe that. But there's a lot more. It's a lot
It's
slower and a
harsher.
lot more depth to it that I don't think I liked.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think it's a little bit harsher as far as like how, when they talk. So I can see what you're saying, but I mean that brings me to something that a friend of mine and I were talking about a long time ago. Ben, if you're listening to this, basically one of the things they talked about when he talked about to me was, there was a lot of difference between the original series and then the next generation, and how the Klingons obviously changed as far as the style and how they look. Well, it's because the ability and like costumes and all this other stuff, technology has changed and how they can make them look. And I know that comment with like Worf and Oak, we don't talk about that, blah blah blah. That was just kind of like a way to say, okay, we know, and
Right.
like you said, 25 years ago, I mean, that they act looked good. That was what a Klingon looked like. I mean, that was 25 years ago, though. Now, some 25 years later, bam, we have some new abilities to really bring in a different look to it. But I mean, it's just a little bit of change, and I think that's one of the things that stays constant with Star Trek is every single iteration of Star Trek, Klingons look different.
Yep. Well, so moving forward, uh, we move to a scene where we see Commander Michael Burnham and Captain Philippa Giorgio on what seems to be a desolate planet, trying to assist some locals through what they describe as being a long-term drought. I can't remember how many years they said, but it was like something like a 20-year, 29-year drought. Um, and they're trying to help out this local species without violating general order. And I think we all know that's going to be the prime directive later on. So um, we see Captain Giorgio lead Burnham through the sand plains to like a well where uh, she fires a phaser, which causes water to bubble out, and right away we can see that the local population is happy about that. And they're trying to get away both before the local population gets to them, as well as a sandstorm that's coming to go through. And we see Captain Giorgio doing something that's maybe a little weird, and Burnham's not really on board with it either. But we find that she's actually drawing a pattern in the sand, so that way the Shinzo can find them. So moments later, we see the Shinzo break orbit or break atmosphere and kind of swoop down in just low enough to be able to beam them up. So, guys, at this point, this is our first time hearing the theme music. What did you guys think of that theme song?
I mean, it was great to hear again, and I thought it was a great introduction for both those characters, and to kind of reestablish where we are on the timeline. Just like you said, it wasn't the Prime Directive, but it was what General Order or whatever it was, whatever they say.
It was
And
General
I
Order 1.
Yeah, there you go. And I just thought it was a really great scene, and it showed how they both relied on each other and worked well together, kind of setting you know the whole series potentially.
Yeah, I gotta tell you that the first time I heard that theme song, like all of the hair stood up on my arms. Like it was the first time since I think Next Generation that a theme song and an opening sequence actually made me feel something for Star Trek. It was amazing.
I thought it was good. I didn't really get the feels like you guys did. I thought the coolest part of that is when the Shinzao, as how you say it, kind of went and below atmosphere, came through the clouds, and Giorgio said, what she say, guiding a star or something. Thought that was pretty cool. It just kind of goes to show how it's not only about technology; it's about using your wits to accomplish your means. And I think that kind of was one lesson that she was trying to teach Michael.
All right. Well, um, so at this point, I mentioned that we got to see the opening credits for the first time, and once the credits wrap up, we see the Shenzhou at warp. We're not really sure what the mission is yet, but we learned that it's the mission right now is to investigate a drifting deep space interstellar relay that's malfunctioning, and when they get there to investigate, they detect an unexplained object while performing a long distance scan. And this region of space is kind of interesting because it happens to fall around a binary star system. And because of that, they're kind of limited as to what they can do. The radiation from the binary star restricts them from being able to get close to this object that they find out there. So, determining to check it out, though, Commander Burnham insists on taking a spacewalk and actually going as close as she can to this object to see it for herself and kind of take some readings. Um, but we also are introduced at this time to the science officer, which is a new species called Kelpian, to Commander Saru. What do you guys think of Saru at this point?
I It was definitely different and interesting. I think we mentioned it. Well, maybe not on the podcast, but he's actually a Ball State alum, the actor who plays him, and so I was excited to see that he was going to be one of the main characters. I didn't know what his role was going to be exactly. I liked it. I mean, it was kind of weird how his what are they called, ganglia on his neck kind of comes up,
Mhm.
and they kind of explain that pretty fast to understand what's going on with that. And I thought that was kind of an interesting ability of his, I guess. I didn't really know how much it was going to come into play, but as we go along, you'll see it does a lot actually.
One of the things that I noticed was the level of freedom that they had as far as like to be able to how they spoke to each other, how they him and Michael quibbled. Seems like they argued as far as like first officer and what the third in command or the lieutenant commander or whatever rank he was. They kind of like just bickered a lot, and I just didn't really show like obviously it's a different type of ship than what I'm used to seeing with like the Enterprise and how Picard would run the ship or how I don't know they spoke to each other like on D Space Nine, when they're on the in the command bridge or whatever. And I don't know. I wasn't a fan of that right off the bat. I mean, it kind of plays into the rest of the series a little bit, or for what I've seen. And I liked the Subaru's character. I've grown to like him a lot. Probably one of my favorite guys so far on Discovery. I'm not as far as you guys, but um, I don't know, it was okay.
Yeah, I think Eric kind of alluded to it. We're going to learn more about Saru and his species as we go forward. But Immediately I understood that the Kelpian species have like this almost spidey sense for fear, and that they will most likely shy away from anything that's considered a risk taker, which is completely opposite Burnham, who has already kind of proven herself to be the risk taker on the bridge. So that's kind of interesting to me. So with that, we learn that Burnham has kind of won that argument. Going to go spacewalk. So she shoots out um, in a spacesuit towards that unexplained object, and as she approaches it and interacts with it, she the only word she can come to describe it as is something incredibly old. Um, and it's very shortly after that moment that she's startled and attacked by something, and during the scuffle, she accidentally kills this other being that turns out to be a Klingon. So, and naturally, for those of us who aren't paying for the CBS All Access without commercial breaks, we get sent to a commercial break at this point. So, um, after that commercial break, um, we find that Burnham is in something of a dream sequence where she's dreaming about her time on Vulcan as a child, um, and she can see uh, her adopted father, Sarek, up above her as she's kind of going through a test at the Vulcan Academy. And it kind of establishes that relationship she has with her adopted father, right? Did you guys pick up on anything there?
Well, this is the first time we figure out that she's Spock's half sister, right? Or well, stepsister, whatever you want to call her.
Yep, officially, this would be the first time we kind of, and we're not even told that. We're just sort of led to water with the fact that Sarek is there.
Right. I can't remember when we watched it live if we knew it at that point. I don't think we did though, did we?
I think we did because we were reading spoilers.
Oh, maybe. I mean, right away, you know, obviously she calls him Sarek, so you know right away what's going on. I found it interesting, a little weird, a little out there. I remember at the time, um, but knowing how season one and season two ends, I think they did a really good job with it. But I think at the time I was like, oh, really? Like, why did they do that? You know?
Well, it's like definitely a stretch to me to tie things together. I mean, having watched the originals, or yeah, not the original series, but well, yeah, the original series and Next Generation, you know who Sarek is, but it seems just kind of like a stretch. It's like, oh, we got to make sure we tie this Trek into old Trek.
Yeah, yeah, I kind of felt that too. The first time that I watched through it was I really wasn't sure what we were doing here. But as I watched through it the second time through, I'm definitely starting to pick up on the rhythm and why they had to introduce it the way they did here to show why Burnham is different, right?
But yeah, I mean that's very true. I mean, if we didn't understand her as Vulcan, or not necessarily Vulcan herself, but raised by Vulcans, then it really kind of lays the foundation for her character with the level of knowledge and lack of emotion, a hard time with relationships and dealing with her feelings.
Sure. Well, so as Burnham wakes up from this dream sequence, we find that she's in the sick bay being treated for her radiation burns from being out exposed to that binary star for so long. And as she describes her experience, she's told by Saru that she must have been mistaken. There's no way that the Klingons could be here. Um, on the other hand, though, Captain Giorgio believes her, and she locks weapons onto that object to kind of establish dominance over the situation. But immediately, uh, the Klingon Takuma decloaks his ship and formally introduces himself to Captain Giorgio and the crew of the Shenzhou. So at this point, I think we hit another commercial break there for a minute. So we kind of get a cut scene back to the bridge of that flagship with Takuma and a group of Klingons kind of debating internally about whether or not they're going to attack the Federation. But Takuma insists that this whole situation here on this particular um, object in space is to fulfill an ancient prophecy by having what he describes as a torchbearer um, unite the Klingon people. And it's at this point we meet an albino Klingon named Vogue that has no house, and he volunteers to be that torchbearer. And I don't think everybody kind of agreed with that. So, um, when you guys watch this part, what did you kind of think about the fact that we're seeing like an albino Klingon and this sort of disagreement between the houses of the Klingon?
I thought it was good. It was classic Klingon. You know, it was showing their prejudice and kind of what we've always seen from Klingons, really, their pride and how they shun other families who aren't honored and stuff like that. So I felt this all fit the Klingons backstory very well.
I had a hard time following it. I was more focused on watching them talk and in their Klingon language, and I just couldn't follow what they were. I was just hard time with this. I even reading the everything. I just had a hard time following what was happening.
Sure. Well, so at this point, we learn that Captain Giorgio is by Starfleet to wait for backup, to not make any moves or do any backup. And Burnham disagrees with this, and she kind of speaks out pretty vocally for being Vulcan influenced. She seems kind of emotional in this moment, and anyway, she kind of takes a moment to contact Sarek to ask her how the Vulcans have dealt with the Klingons in the past, since they haven't had um, near the bumpy relationship that Starfleet has. And Sarek tells a story about the way that when the Vulcans first were introduced to the Klingons, they were pretty much blown away right away. But after that first interaction, the Vulcans made it a like a what's the word I'm looking for here? Like an instinctual reaction to fire first. Like as soon as they come in contact with Klingons, to just fire at them and attack first, so that way the Klingons respect them as a species. Um, what did you guys think of that? I thought that was kind of an interesting strategy.
Didn't seem very Vulcan to me, but it made sense
Absolutely.
um, that that's how the Klingons would respond.
I mean, was it their logical conclusion on that's what they should do?
That's what I was thinking. That this has to, like, after the first couple of times of just being blown to smithereens after running into the Klingons, that attacking first, it must be the most logical thing to do. Which I guess is where we get the name for this episode. I think even Michael Burnham at this point calls it the Vulcan Hello.
That's a good point. That was a good lead into the name of the first episode.
So at this point, Giorgio again disagrees with Burnham and thinks that this is a bad idea. Um, so they have some time in Captain Giorgio's ready room, and Burnham sort of, very belligerent and insistent that this is the way that it needs to go. She performs the Vulcan neck pinch on Captain Giorgio, causing her to pass out and hit the floor. So Burnham springs into action. She goes to the bridge. She orders the attack, and if it wasn't for the bridge crew kind of asking, what the heck, and Saru almost digging his heels in on this happening, it probably would have occurred. But kind of in the nick of time, Captain Giorgio wakes up, springs into the room, and calls everything to stop, and basically calls Burnham a mutineer at that point. So we watch as they're still arguing on screen. Uh, Several more Klingon vessels start warping in one at a time, and that's how we kind of close out this episode one. So now that we're finished with episode one, guys, what are some of your thoughts and going through your head as we've seen this first episode?
I liked it. I like learning about the characters. Like I said, I wasn't a big fan of the new Klingon look, but I liked the excitement and how fast everything was moving, and I was definitely hooked and ready for episode two.
I definitely was not expecting a mutiny on the very first episode. I liked seeing the different races. Not only do we see this like cyborg looking, um, bluish, whitish, whatever looking, navigator, where we also see, um, you know, not only, different genders, different cultures, just a whole bunch of like mixture of different types of things all over. So I thought it was pretty cool. I liked it.
Yeah, I liked it too. I think that it shows us a different, grittier type of Trek. I think something that isn't as clean and isn't as as ship shape as it would have been at the beginning of the original series, and maybe a federation that hasn't completely found their voice yet, or found their binding force yet. So I don't know. To me, this is what Enterprise should have been, in my opinion, and wasn't. So I'm glad that we're where we're ready for episode 2.
Yep.
Cool. Well, so right off the bat here in episode 2, we kind of get a recap of see that same sequence there of Captain Giorgio springing onto the bridge and calling everything to stop, and the Klingon ships warping in. Um, we also get a sequence there of Giorgio ordering Burnham to the brig, and it's at that moment we kind of get a flashback. We see Captain welcome a very a very Vulcan looking Michael Burnham to the Shenzhou for the first time. And after some discussions between Sarek and Captain Giorgio, we see that Burnham is sort of invited to be a part of the crew, or more encouraged to be a part of the crew to become a part of Starfleet. Um, Flash again, we come back to the present. We learn that this ancient vessel that the Klingons were on is the beacon that was foretold. It was the the part of the prophecy that Takuma was trying to fulfill here. Volk ignites the beacon to unite the 24 houses of the Klingon race, um, but not without some disagreement. So we hear from a Klingon named Cole from the House of Kor, and he insists that Takuma is from a disgraced house and he's not worthy to bind the Klingons together, and that his acceptance of Volk, who doesn't have a house, who doesn't have any sort of history behind him, is further evidence of this. Takuma then kind of bandies for support and is trying to lobby for others to follow him, to uh, go against the Federation, since the Federation threatened to destroy the Klingon individuality and everything that the Klingon stands for, and that the very existence of the Federation is going to poison the Klingon way and the Klingon race with their Federation values. So after some discussion, um, he talks them into to begin to attack the Shenzhou, and that sequence goes pretty quickly. We get to see him what ship battle might look like a little bit there, although it's kind of one on many at this point. Um, and the only thing that stops it is the arrival of the USS Europa, led by Admiral Brett Anderson. Who I don't know that I recognize the name, but I think the way they brought it up in this episode, it was something we maybe should have known. Eric, what did you think about that?
I didn't recognize them at all either. I didn't know the ship either, the Europa. I didn't know if it had been mentioned in a previous series, and I just didn't catch it.
Yeah, it definitely felt like to me like it was led to us as so I didn't. And for any of you listeners out there, definitely right why we should have recognized the Europa. Um, so when the Europa arrives, there a ceasefire is called. The Klingons stop firing. They Takuma says, "We come in peace," and almost as he finishes that sentence, we start to see the Europa sort of uh, like fold in on itself, and we don't really know why. But as it's starting to crumple from the front side, we see a much larger Klingon vessel decloak, and you can see that it's on a collision course with the Europa, kind of just cutting it right down the center. Um, and Admiral Anderson, kind of in an attempt to thwart this attack, he orders the Europa to self-destruct. And it's at that moment that Takuma proclaims himself to be Kalis incarnate, or the ancient uniter. So, what do you guys think so far about this episode?
I remember being really confused about why they ran the ship cloaked. It didn't really make a lot of sense to me. Number one, why would the Enterprise ship not have its shields up? And I mean, the to be cloaked, you're not allowed to have your shields up. So like, wouldn't that have just totally wrecked the Klingon ship?
That's
But
yeah, I definitely thought so too. It should have caused some damage.
so I don't know if because they said, hey, ceasefire, that the Europa supposedly lowered their shields. I don't know if I missed that. Maybe that's what was going on. That's what it seemed like when they hit. I wasn't a big fan of that whole scene. I mean, I kind of liked how he self-destructed at the end, kind of made him a hero. It reminded me of, our great captains that we know. Like that's something that I feel like Picard and all them have, almost had to do themselves. We've seen that a couple times.
Kirk's dad.
Oh yeah, good call there. What was his name in the first Kelvin movie?
Right. But yeah, I don't know. It was okay. I at the time I remember watching and thinking, "What just happened?" I think I may have even said that 'cause I think we were watching it together. I didn't quite understand it, and then I was like, "Well, that's not the Trek that we know," you know?
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was okay. I mean, I thought it was kind of interesting that we see a little bit more as far as like space battle and stuff, and I always enjoy seeing that. So it was pretty interesting. I wouldn't say that this was my favorite episode so far, but um I like the fact that it's almost destroyed, and how she uh Bynum or Michael Burnham gets out of the brig.
Oh yeah, don't jump too far ahead. We still got a little bit more.
Oh, my bad.
Oh, that's okay. So I'll use that as a nice clean segue here. We find Burnham still stuck in the brig, and as she's sitting there, she kind of gets some telepathic encouragement from her father, Sarek. And not a lot of specifics really to go in here into here other than um, he kind of convinces her to keep trying and to keep moving forward. So um, after she sort of wakes up from this moment of telepathic connection, she sort of outlogics her way with the computer so that the computer will release her for the sake of her life. I thought that was kind of interesting the way that she was able to convince the computer that this was the best logical course of action. So once she gets through that mess, she finds her way to the bridge and she convinces Captain Giorgio that the only logical strategy at this point is to take Takuvma hostage to sort of stop this Klingon progression into Federation space. And um, it's at this point that they kind of come up with a plan that uses. Well, let me back up here. What's going on in the outside the ship is they're noticing that the Klingon are collecting their dead, and you see that tractor beams are pulling in the dead bodies of all the Klingons that are kind of floating around. So they come up with a plan to stash the guts from a photon torpedo inside one of the bodies of the Klingon dead as it's being tractored into the Klingon ship. So once it arrives on the ship, it detonates and basically cripples that flagship. And they take that opportunity to beam onto the ship to try to capture Takuma. And this was kind of a short sequence, I thought, but what we find here is that almost immediately a fight ensues, and Burnham finds herself fighting with Voke and Giorgio with Takuvma, and Burnham is kind of winning over Voke and is sort of beating him to some degree, but Giorgio, unfortunately, Takuvma gets the best of her and kills her. So it's in that moment that Burnham finds that like moment of human emotion and revenge and kills Takuvma almost in cold blood right there. And it's at that moment we realize that it at least I realize that it dooms the plan of taking Takuvma hostage, preventing him from being this martyr that unites all Klingon um, houses and whatnot. So it's kind of a clutch moment in this episode, I thought. And there's not much left in the episode, so in the moments we have left, we find that Voke leans down to Takuma and vows to remember him and to continue his legacy and his mission. And almost immediately we flash over to Burnham, who is now in a courtroom being court-martialed by Starfleet. And after some discussion, they court-martial her to a life sentence imprisonment for her mutiny. So I don't know. This was kind of a strong way to finish off this episode, I thought, and I was surprised that here we are 2 episodes into this, and our main character for that's been kind of the figurehead for all of Discovery is already finding herself like court-martialed and imprisoned for life. Like, sort of blew my mind a little bit there the first time I watched this. Like, how the heck are we going to get out of this situation?
That's very true. I never thought about that, but yeah, it was almost kind of like, well, show's over.
Well, the interesting thing was, I remember us thinking, well, who's going to be the captain now?
Oh
Because
yeah.
we didn't know what was going on, and then I think we'd seen some leak stuff about someone coming in, but the ship was different, right? And so,
Yeah. Well, I mean, at this point, we haven't even seen the 2 episodes, and we've seen a bunch of Klingon vessels. The Europa gets taken out. Some other, unnamed Federation ships, and the Shenzhou, which is now no longer really relevant at the end of this episode. So the whole show is called Discovery, yet we haven't even seen the Discovery yet.
right. And we didn't know, what crew was going to transfer over. We met this whole crew. I mean, not in great detail by any means, but we didn't know, well, is Saru gone? I mean, we didn't think so, but we didn't know how it was all going to play out. So it was really interesting the way to end it.
Yeah.
And
Definitely very untrek like to go this far into a series without meeting your permanent staff.
right. I mean, and we knew Burnham was a main star, so she was going to somehow get back into it, but we didn't know how. I just thought they did a really good job, and yeah, coming up on the next few episodes, I thought they did an excellent job of explaining, what was going on and everything. I know at this point I was really excited. I remember being really excited for meeting, the new ship, the Discovery, and the captain, which I really liked. I thought Jason Isaac, or is it Jason Isaac?
Yeah, that's who we're going to meet.
Yeah, I thought he did a great job. And
I remember thinking, okay, well, maybe this is going to be a completely different type of Star Trek show, like kind of like Deep Space Nine, where it necessarily wasn't 100% about the Federation. When it was about the um, Bajorans and the Cardassians, and I was thinking, well, maybe this is going to be like an underground kind of resistance type thing, or about like a prison planet or something. I don't know, because I didn't know much about it, and I remember thinking, okay, well, something else is going to happen, or this is going to be a completely weird type of Star Trek.
how much time had passed between when she got locked up and when Discovery picked her up? I know it says, was it like 6 months or something?
I think we're going to find out at the first part of the next episode, but yeah, I don't remember what. I mean, there's definitely enough time to pass that she completely changes her demeanor and the way she carries herself, her hairdo, and everything else, and enough time for some of the people that were on the bridge of the Shenzhou to be, um, we find, I can't remember what her name was, and we'll find out later on. Unnamed person up on Khan has now has cybernetic implants because of the damage to her in this episode, and we find Saru on Discovery at the first part of the next episode. So there's got to be a lot of transition between that this episode 2 and episode 3.
Right.
Well, so any final thoughts before we wrap up this episode, guys?
And if you haven't watched Discovery and for some reason you're listening to our podcast, do yourself a favor and watch it. And then watch Picard.
Okay, that I am the one of the three of us that didn't give this show a chance when it first came out, and having pushed myself through these first couple episodes and watched it again. I'm not as big of a Trek fan as you guys. I like Star Trek, but I'm not like a lunatic like you guys are. And the thing is, like, this show is really good. Like, I'm almost done, I think, maybe 3/4 of the way through season 1, and I'm enjoying it. And I know you said that the later half of the season gets better, but I can only imagine, because about halfway through, I was like, "Oh my god, are you serious?" I mean, I've texted you guys, I don't know how many times, thinking like, what's going on? Like, are you serious?" It's good. It's an enjoyable watch if you want to watch a episodic Star Trek and you want an overarching story like more like D Space Nine. You're gonna like it.
It has a lot more surprises in it than you typically get in a Trek.
Absolutely, and game-changing surprises. Not just oh, that guy is is married to is dating the other guy, and this person is sleeping with this person, or whatever. It's just game-changing surprises.
Yeah, this isn't your father's Trek. This is going to be a different journey for attacking this for the first time, and just be willing to play the long game on this. It's not going to be like Will said, as episodic as the last ones. You're not going to see an episode start and finish, and everything kind of be tied up in a nice clean bow at the end. You've got to be ready to sort of accept this as a whole season arc instead of a onesie twosie sort of episodes or things like that. So I'm excited. This being my second time through, and I'm excited to continue back through this and pick up because I know where we're going. So, yeah, man, I'm glad we're doing this, and we'll just keep going next week.
All right, everybody. Thanks for checking out our podcast. Make sure you go to our website, maturemindedgamers.com. We do video games, board games, Star Trek, and much more. Have yourself a great day.